Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome all to today's reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. We are reading from Adi Lila, chapter 4, and we'll be reading from verse 33 onwards. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripa tamam vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Verse 33. Then by hearing about the pure love of the residents of Raja, devotees will worship me on the path of spontaneous love, abandoning all rituals of religiosity and fruitive activity. Purport. Many realized souls such as Raghunath Das Goswami and King Kulashekar have recommended with great emphasis that one develop this spontaneous love of Godhead even at the risk of transgressing all the traditional codes of morality and religiosity. Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, has written in his prayers called the Mana Shiksha that one should simply worship Radha and Krishna with all attention. Na dharmam Shruti Gana Nirkutam Kila Kuru. One should not be much interested in performing Vedic rituals or simply following rules and regulations. King Kulashekar has written similarly in his book Mukundamala Stotra, text 5. Nastha dharme na vasu nichaye naiva tad bhavatu bhagwan Purva karmanurupam etat prarthyam mama bahupatam janma janmantare api tvat padambho ruhar yugagata nischala bhaktir astu. I have no attraction for performing religious rituals or holding any earthly kingdom. I do not care for sense enjoyments. Let them appear and disappear in accordance with my previous deeds. My only desire is to be fixed in devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord, even though I may continue to take birth here life after life. Verse 34. Krishna manifests his eternal human-like form and performs his pastimes to show mercy to the devotees. Having heard such pastimes, one should engage in service to him. Purport. This text is from Srimad Bhagavatam 10.33.36. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has innumerable expansions of his transcendental form, who eternally exist in the spiritual world. This material world is only a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, where everything is manifested without inebriety. There everything is in its original existence, free from the domination of time. Time cannot deteriorate or interfere with the conditions in the spiritual world, where different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are the recipients of the worship of different living entities in their constitutional spiritual positions. In the spiritual world, all existence is unadulterated goodness. The goodness found in the material world is contaminated by the modes of passion and ignorance. The saying that the human form of life is the best position for devotional service has its special significance, because only in this form can a living entity revive his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The human form is considered the highest state in the cycle of the species of life in the material world. If one takes advantage of this highest kind of material form, one can regain his position of devotional service to the Lord. Incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead appear in all the species of life. Although this is inconceivable to the human brain, the Lord's pastimes are differentiated according to the appreciating capacity of the different types of bodies of the living entities. The Supreme Lord bestows the most merciful benediction upon human society when he appears in his human form. It is then that humanity gets the opportunity to engage in different kinds of eternal service to the Lord. Special natural appreciation of the descriptions of a particular pastime of Godhead indicates the constitutional position of a living entity. Adoration, servitorship, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love are the 5 primary relationships with Krishna. The highest perfection stage of the conjugal relationship, enriched by many sentiments, gives the maximum relishable mellow to the devotee. The Lord appears in different incarnations, as a fish, tortoise, and boar, as Parshuram, Lord Ram, Buddha, and so on, to reciprocate the different appreciations of living entities in different stages of evolution. The conjugal relationship of amorous love called Parakiya Ras is the unparalleled perfection of love exhibited by Lord Krishna and his devotees. A class of so-called devotees known as Sahajiyas try to imitate the Lord's pastimes, although they have no understanding of the amorous love in his expansions of pleasure potency. Their superficial imitation can create havoc on the path for the advancement of one's spiritual relationship with the Lord. Material sexual indulgence can never be equated with spiritual love, which is in unadulterated goodness. The activities of the Sahajiyas simply lower one deeper into the material contamination of the senses and mind. Krishna's transcendental pastimes display eternal servitorship to Adhokshaja, the Supreme Lord, who is beyond all conception through material senses. Materialistic conditioned souls do not understand the transcendental exchanges of love, but they like to indulge in sense gratification in the name of devotional service. The activities of the Supreme Lord can never be understood by irresponsible persons who think the pastimes of Radha and Krishna to be ordinary affairs. The Rasa dance is arranged by Krishna's internal potency Yogamaya, and it is beyond the grasp of the materially affected person, trying to throw mud into transcendence with their perversity. The Sahajiyas misinterpret the sayings Tat Paratvena Nirmalam and Tat Paro Bhavet. By misinterpreting Tadrishaha Krida, they want to indulge in sex while pretending to imitate Lord Krishna, but one must actually understand the imports of the words through the intelligence of the authorized Goswamis. Srila Narottam Das Thakur, in his praise to the Goswamis, has explained his inability to understand such spiritual affairs. Rupa Raghunath Padeha Ibi Akuti Kabe Hama Bujaba Se Yugala Piriti. When I shall be eager to understand the literature given by the Goswamis, then I shall be able to understand the transcendental love affairs of Radha and Krishna. In other words, unless one is trained under the disciplic succession of the Goswamis, one cannot understand Radha and Krishna. The conditioned souls are naturally averse to understanding the spiritual existence of the Lord, and if they try to know the transcendental nature of the Lord's pastimes while they remain absorbed in materialism, they are sure to blunder like the Sahajiyas. Verse 35. Here the use of the verb bhavet, which is the imperative mood, tells us that this certainly must be done. Non-compliance would be abandonment of duty. Purport. This imperative is applicable to pure devotees. Neophytes will be able to understand these affairs only after being elevated by regulated devotional service under the expert guidance of the spiritual master. Then they too will be competent to hear of the love affairs of Radha and Krishna. As long as one is in material conditioned life, strict discipline is required in the matter of moral and immoral activities. The absolute world is transcendental and free from such distinctions because their inebriety is not possible. But in this material world, a sexual appetite necessitates distinction between moral and immoral conduct. There are no sexual activities in the spiritual world. The transactions between lover and beloved in the spiritual world are pure transcendental love and unadulterated bliss. One who has not been attracted by the transcendental beauty of rasa will certainly be dragged down into material attraction, thus to act in material contamination and progress to the darkest region of hellish life. But by understanding the conjugal love of Radha and Krishna, one is freed from the grip of attraction to material so-called love between man and woman. Similarly, one who understands the pure parental love of Nanda and Yashoda for Krishna will be saved from being dragged into material parental affection. If one accepts Krishna as the supreme friend, the attraction of material friendship will be finished for him, and he will not be dismayed by so-called friendship with mundane wranglers. If he is attracted by servitorship to Krishna, he will no longer have to serve the material body in the degraded status of material existence, with the false hope of becoming master in the future. Similarly, one who sees the greatness of Krishna in neutrality will certainly never again seek the so-called relief of impersonalist or voidist philosophy. If one is not attracted by the transcendental nature of Krishna, one is sure to be attracted to material enjoyment, thus to become implicated in the clinging network of virtuous and sinful activities, and to continue material existence by transmigrating from one material body to another. Only in Krishna consciousness one can achieve the highest perfection of life. Verse 36 and 37. Just as these desires are the fundamental reason for Krishna's appearance, whereas destroying the demons is only an incidental necessity, so for Krishna Chaitanya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, promulgating the dharma of the age is incidental. Verse 38. When the Lord desired to appear for another reason, the time for promulgating the religion of the age also arose. Thus, with the two intentions, the Lord appeared with his devotees and tasted the nectar of prema with the congregational chanting of the holy name. Thus he spread kirtan even among the untouchables. He wove a wreath of the holy name and prema with which he garlanded the entire material world. Verse 41. In this way, assuming the sentiment of a devotee, he preached devotional service while practicing it himself. I'll repeat. In this way, assuming the sentiment of a devotee, he preached devotional service while practicing it himself. Purport: when Rupa Goswami met Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Prayag, Allahabad, he offered his respectful obeisances by submitting that Lord Chaitanya was the more magnanimous than any other avatar of Krishna because he was distributing love of Krishna. His mission was to enhance love of Godhead in the human form of life. The highest achievement is to attain the platform of love of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya did not invent a system of religion as people sometimes assume. Religious systems are meant to show the existence of God, who is then generally approached as the cosmic order supplier. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's transcendental mission is to distribute love of God to everyone. Anyone who accepts God as a supreme can take to the process of chanting Hare Krishna and become a lover of God. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya is the most magnanimous. This munificent broadcasting of devotional service is possible only for Krishna himself. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has taught the philosophy of surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who has surrendered to the Supreme can make further progress by learning to love Him. Therefore, the Krishna consciousness movement propagated by Lord Chaitanya is especially meant for those who are cognizant of the presence of the Supreme Godhead, the ultimate controller of everything. His mission is to teach people how to dovetail themselves into the engagements of transcendental loving service. He is Krishna teaching his own service from the position of a devotee. The Lord's acceptance of the role of a devotee in the eternal form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is another of the Lord's wonderful features. A conditioned soul cannot reach the absolute personality of Godhead by his imperfect endeavor, and therefore it is wonderful that Lord Sri Krishna, in the form of Lord Gauranga, has made it easy for everyone to approach him. Swarup Damodar Goswami has it described Lord Chaitanya as Krishna himself with the attitude of Radharani, or a combination of Radha and Krishna. The intention of Lord Chaitanya is to taste Krishna's sweetness in transcendental love. He does not care to think of himself as Krishna because he wants the position of Radharani. We should remember this. A class of so-called devotees called the Nadiya Nagaris or Gaura Nagaris pretend that they have the sentiments of gopis toward Lord Chaitanya, but they do not realize that he placed himself not as the enjoyer Krishna, but as the enjoyed the devotee of Krishna. The concoctions of unauthorized persons pretending to be bona fide have not been accepted by Lord Chaitanya. Presentations such as those of the Gaura Nagaris are only disturbances to the sincere execution of the mission of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya is undoubtedly Krishna himself, and he is always non-different from Srimati Radharani, but the emotion technically called Vipralambha Bhava, which the Lord adopted for confidential reasons, should not be disturbed in the name of service. A mundaner should not unnecessarily intrude into affairs of transcendence and thereby displease the Lord. One must always be on guard against this sort of devotional anomaly. A devotee is not meant to create disturbances to Krishna, as Srila Rupa Goswami has explained. Devotional service is anukuliyena, or favorable to Krishna. Acting unfavorably toward Krishna is not devotion. Kamsa was the enemy of Krishna. He always thought of Krishna, but he thought of him as an enemy. One should always avoid such unfavorable so-called service. Lord Chaitanya has accepted the role of Radharani, and we should support that position as Swarup Damodar did in the Gambhira, the room where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed in Puri. He always reminded Lord Chaitanya of Radha's feeling of separation as they are described in Srimad Bhagavatam. And Lord Chaitanya appreciated his assistance. But the Gaura Nagaris who place Lord Chaitanya in the position of enjoyer and themselves as enjoyed are not approved by Lord Chaitanya or by Lord Chaitanya's followers. Instead of being blessed, the foolish imitators are left completely apart. Their concoctions are against the principles of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The doctrine of transcendental enjoyment by Krishna cannot be mixed up with the doctrine of transcendental feeling of separation from Krishna in the role of Radharani. Verse 42, 4 kinds of devotees are the receptacles of the 4 kinds of mellows in the love of Godhead, namely servitude, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. Verse 43, each kind of devotee feels that his sentiment is the most excellent, and thus in that mood he tastes great happiness with Lord Krishna. Verse 44, But if we compare the sentiments in an impartial mood, we find that the conjugal sentiment is superior to all others in sweetness. Purport: no one is higher or lower than anyone else in transcendental relationships with the Lord or in the absolute realm. Everything is equal. But although these relationships are absolute, there are also transcendental differences between them. Thus, the transcendental relationship of conjugal love is considered the highest perfection. Verse 45, increasing love is experienced in various tastes, one above another, but that love which has the highest taste in the gradual succession of desire manifests itself in the form of conjugal love. Purport: this verse 45, yathottaram asau swada vishesola samai api ratir vasanya swadvai bhasate kapi kashyachit. This is the verse from Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 2.5.38. Verse 46, therefore I call it Madhur Ras. It has two further divisions, namely wedded and unwedded love. Verse 48, this mood is unabounded in the damsels of Raja, but among them it finds its perfection in Sri Radha. Verse 49, her pure, mature love surpasses that all others. Her love is the cause of Lord Krishna's tasting the sweetness of the conjugal relationship. Verse 50, therefore Lord Gauranga, who is Sri Hari himself, accepted the sentiments of Radha and thus fulfilled his own desires. Purport of the four kinds of reciprocation of loving service: Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya and Madhurya. Madhurya is considered the fullest, but the conjugal relationship is further divided into two varieties, namely Swakia and Parakiya. Swakia is the relationship with Krishna as a formerly married husband, and Parakiya is the relationship with Krishna as a paramour. Expert analysts have decided that the transcendental ecstasy of the Parakiya mellow is better because it is more enthusiastic. This phase of conjugal love is found in those who have surrendered to the Lord in intense love, knowing well that such illicit love with paramour is not morally approved in society. The risks involved in such love of Godhead makes this emotion superior to the relationship in which such risk is not involved. The validity of such risk, however, is possible only in the transcendental realm. Swakiya and Parakiya conjugal love of Godhead have no existence in the material world, and Parakiya is not exhibited anywhere in Vaikuntha, but only in the portion of Golok Vrindavan known as Raja. Some devotees think that Krishna is eternally the enjoyer in Golok Vrindavan, but only sometimes comes to the platform of Raja to enjoy Parakiya Ras. The 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, however, have explained that Krishna's pastimes in Raja are eternal. Like his other activities in Golok Vrindavan, Raja is the confidential part of Golok Vrindavan. Krishna exhibited his Raja pastimes on the surface of this world, and similar pastimes are eternally exhibited in Raja in Golok Vrindavan, where Parakiya Ras is ever existent. In the 3rd chapter of this epic, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraja Goswami has explicitly accepted the fact that Krishna appears in this material world at the end of Dwapar age of the 28th Chaturyug of Vaivasvata Manu and brings with him his Rajadham. Which is the eternal abode of his highest pastime. As the Lord appears by his own internal potency, so he also brings all his paraphernalia by the same internal potency without extraneous help. It is further stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that the Parakiya sentiments exist only in the transcendental realm and nowhere else. This highest form of ecstasy can exist only in the most confidential part of the transcendental world, but by the causeless mercy of the Lord, we can have a peep into that invisible Raja. The transcendental mellow relished by the gopis in Vraja is super excellently featured in Srimati Radharani. Mature assimilation of the transcendental humor of conjugal love is represented by Srimati Radharani, whose felt feelings are incomprehensible even to the Lord himself. The intensity of a loving service is the highest form of ecstasy. No one can surpass Srimati Radharani in relishing the qualities of the Lord through this supreme transcendental mellow. Therefore, the Lord himself agreed to assume the position of Radharani in the form of Lord Sri Gauranga. He then relished the highest position of Parakiya Ras as exhibited in the transcendental abode of Vraja. Verse 51. Lord Chaitanya is the shelter of the demigods, the goal of the Upanishads, the be-all and end-all of the great sages, the beautiful shelter of his devotees, and the essence of the love of the lotus-eyed gopis. Will he again be object of my vision? Verse 52. Lord Krishna desired to taste the limitless nectarian mellows of the love of one of his multitude of loving damsels, Sri Radha, and so he has assumed the form of Lord Chaitanya. He has tasted that love while hiding his own dark complexion with her effulgent yellow color. May that Lord Chaitanya confer upon us his grace. Verses 51 and 52 are respectively Pratham Sri Chaitanya Shatak 2 and Dvitiya Sri Chaitanya Ashtaka 3 from the Stva Mala of Srila Rupa Goswami. Verse 53. To accept ecstatic love is the main reason he appeared and re-established the religious system for this age. I shall now explain that reason. Everyone, please listen. Verse 54. Having first given hints about the verse describing the principal reasons why the Lord appeared, now I shall manifest its full meaning. Verse 55. The loving affairs of Sri Radha and Krishna are transcendental manifestations of the Lord's internal pleasure giving potency. Although Radha and Krishna are one in their identity, they separated themselves eternally. Now these two transcendental identities have again united in the form of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. I bow down to them who has manifested himself with the sentiment and complexion of Srimati Radharani, although he is Krishna himself. Purport: this text is from the diary of Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami. It appears as the fifth of the first 14 verses of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we will continue our reading from verse 56 onwards next time. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.